It all happens here in the Sistine Chapel. Surrounded by the priceless art of Michelangelo, cardinals come together to elect a pope. But it wasn't always like this. Centuries ago, the voting process was quite different. In fact, it was a different group altogether that elected the pope.
At first, the election of a pope was much like the way bishops were elected in the first century. It was a Christian community, so really the Christian assembly of Rome who would choose Rome's bishop, who in essence then became the pope.
But with time, the church began to grow. So, to prevent any outside influences from filtering in the election process, a pope called for a change and marked a new direction for the church.
It was Pope Leo IX who in the year 1049 concretely decided that it would be only the cardinals who would elect the pope.
And even though the conclave has taken place in the Sistine Chapel for years now, it was never the official site until John Paul II added a clause to the Apostolic Constitution. It's an election process where religion, tradition, mystery, suspense, and quite often surprise come together.
Usually the elected pope is different from what people expect or imagine. I would say that maybe 12 or 15 times the person who was believed to be elected as pope actually was. That's not a high number considering there have been roughly 300 papal elections.
It's all held behind closed doors, hence the name conclave, meaning with key. Each cardinal has an assigned seat, and so the voting process begins, marking yet another chapter in the history of the Catholic Church.
They are the last images available of the princes of the church before they lock themselves inside the Sistine Chapel. In all, 115 cardinals made their way through the Pauline Chapel, assembled by order and seniority, from the least to the most experienced. But each one has an equally important task ahead, to elect his future leader and father to nearly 1.2 billion souls. Led by American James Harvey, the newest member of the lowest order, the College of Cardinals filed into the Sistine Chapel and were seated according to precedence. Joining them were a handful of people allowed inside the chapel who took their oath on Monday. Once the voting starts, they must leave the room. Once in place, all cardinal electors recited in unison their first vow to respect the rules of the election and to respect the outcome. But more so, they also pledged to keep what happens inside the conclave a secret. As the oath ceremony went on, each cardinal, one by one, walked up the altar of the Sistine Chapel according to their order and seniority. With their hand on the Gospels, each one confirmed their vows.
Et ego tarsicius cardinalis Bertone, sponde ovove oaciuro, sic me Deus satiuret, et ex santa Dei evangelia que manu mea tampo.
After the last cardinal finished their vows about an hour later, Monsignor Guido Marini, the master of papal liturgical celebrations, uttered the famous words, extra omnes, everyone out. Behind closed doors, Cardinal Prosper Grech, who's unable to vote, spoke to cardinals about their responsibilities inside the conclave, then exiting himself. Cardinal Ray, the most senior member and the leader for the conclave, followed and asked if there were any objections to starting the conclave. With none in place, the election process began.
On Wednesday, at around noon, there was a lot of excitement as smoke began to come out of the Sistine Chapel's chimney. Seconds after, though, the excitement turned to disappointment when the smoke turned black. Rome's weather and also skies were grayish, but there was plenty of color as thousands of bright umbrellas covered St. Peter's Square.
My reaction was a little bit disappointed, because if a new pope were elected, That would be cool, and also then I would be able to visit the Sistine Chapel.
Bueno, un poquito desilusionada, pues esperábamos la fumata blanca.
Un poco triste, esperamos ver el humo blanco, pero lamentablemente fue la fumata negra.
As people wait to find out who is elected pope, they talk amongst themselves about what characteristics the next pope should have.
Primero que sea latinoamericano y que sea un papa que traiga mucha paz. Nos hace falta paz en el mundo.
I guess I just want someone that's a little more progressive than Pope Benedict was.
Que tenga el carisma de Juan Pablo II y, no sé, y la forma de ser de Ratzinger.
Cardinal electors will meet once again on Wednesday at around 4 p.m. Rome time. The next time smoke will come out of the Sistine Chapel will be between 5 and 7 p.m. This is the Vatican's so-called Room of Tears. It's just a few feet away from the Sistine Chapel, but most importantly, it's here where a newly elected pope wears his white papal vestment for the first time. And since no one knows exactly who will be elected, the Vatican is prepared. 3 papal vestments of different sizes are already in the Room of Tears. Also, there are 3 different pairs of red shoes and papal hats, so the next pope can choose. It's known as the Room of Tears because the newly elected pope, overwhelmed by both the joy and burden of his new office, is known to shed tears here just moments after being elected pope and before introducing himself to the world before St. Peter's Square.
Cardinal Jorge Mario Bergoglio becomes the first Latin American pope. He was born in Buenos Aires, Argentina on December 17, 1936, Before entering the seminary, he studied chemistry and graduated as a chemical engineer. The new pope is a Jesuit. He taught literature and psychology in Buenos Aires. He was ordained a priest on December 13, 1969, at the age of 33. In 1992, John Paul II appointed him titular bishop of Auca. Then in 1997, he was appointed Archbishop of Buenos Aires and was made a cardinal in 2001. He is a member of the Pontifical Council for the Family and also of the Pontifical Commission for Latin America. Bergoglio has written several books, including Meditations for Religious and Reflections of Hope. Although he was not among papabili at the start of the first conclave back in 2005, he ended up as one of the main candidates. Nearly 8 years later, he emerged as Pope Francis I. At 7:06 in the evening local time in Rome, the Fumata Bianca, or white smoke, appeared before thousands of people at St. Peter's Square. More than an hour later, at 8:13 at night, the proto-deacon, Jean-Louis Touron, made the announcement the world was waiting for. Many of the onlookers were surprised at the election of the Archbishop of Buenos Aires, but after a few minutes, the crowd began chanting his newly chosen name, Francis. After praying for a few minutes inside the Pauline Chapel, he stepped out into the balcony. He became Latin America's first pope and the first to use the name Francis.
Che questo cammino I miei fratelli cardinali sono andati a prenderlo quasi alla fine del mondo, ma siamo qui.
In his first speech, the new pope recalled his predecessor and asked people to pray for him.
Prima di tutto vorrei fare una preghiera per il nostro vescovo emerito Benedetto XVI. Preghiamo tutte insieme per lui, perché il Signore lo benedica e la Madonna lo custodisca. Padre nostro.
Before imparting his first blessing as a new bishop of Rome, Francis I asked the faithful to pray for him as he bowed his head in silence. He then received the stole and recanted his first blessing, Urbi et Orbi.
Et benedictio Dei omnipotentis, Patris, et Filii, et Spiritus Sancti, descenda super vos et maneat semper.
The Argentine cardinal received more than 2/3 of the 115 votes during the fifth round of voting at the conclave on the evening of March 13th. Speaking to the large crowd that assembled at St. Peter's Square, Pope Francis I asked everyone present to pray to achieve greater brotherhood in the world.
Thousands of people dismissed the city's cold and rainy weather when the white smoke emerged from the rooftop of the Sistine Chapel. It was complete excitement. Euphoria broke out in St. Peter's Square when the new Latin American Pope, Francis I, went out to the balcony to greet the people of Rome and of the world. The news was received with excitement by everyone, but especially by Argentinians, where the new Pope is from.
No tengo palabras, pero muy feliz, y que sea americano también, latinoamericano y americano, así que no, muy feliz. Es la primera vez, además, argentino y latinoamericano y americano nomás, así que muy bien, muy contento.
Muy contento y ojalá que venga este aire fresco, esta renovación, que la iglesia le hacía falta y bueno, muy contento porque sea argentino.
Among the thousands of Argentinians, there was also the country's ambassador to the Holy See, Juan Pablo Cafiero.
Muy emocionados, esperemos que esto sea un don, es un don para toda la iglesia, para toda la humanidad. Creemos que bueno, lo que va a ser seguramente el nuevo Papa Francesco, que es nuestro Cardinal Bergoglio, va a ser muy positivo para todos los católicos y para todo el mundo.
The most overwhelming image of the whole night was perhaps the moment when the new Pope asked everyone in St. Peter's Square to take a few moments to pray for him in silence, and he too bowed his head and prayed.